Hello, everyone. In this video, we're going to add a form to our website. And I was thinking of different types of forms we could add. We have the contact us page, and I thought it could just be a generic contact form. But then I got an idea looking around some different library websites of possibly creating a book recommendation form where patrons can enter information about types of books they're interested in, along with their email address, and then a librarian would actually send them a list of recommendations for books they might be interested in. I thought that would be a neat addition to the site. As always, there's flexibility built into this. So if you want to do a contact us form, that's fine as well. But this was just something different that I thought I'd try to add to our site. Now, the thing to remember with forms is that you really need to connect it to some kind of database or a file in order to really collect the form data. So HTML just creates the design for the form, but it doesn't necessarily allow you to actually collect or aggregate the data entered on the form anywhere. So that's kind of a bit more advanced class. I might create a separate video where I talk about it just a little bit. But that would require some other additional programming, certainly in PHP, and also perhaps some SQL. But it's something that's feasible if you're interested in looking up and learning more about how to actually get this form to do something other than just appearing. But for the purposes of this class, if you can get it to appear on the screen, the form elements, then that's perfectly fine. So in order to create a form, we need to call up the form element. And you have to define a form action. Again, what I'm typing here is not an actual website that exists. It's just something I'm entering basically as a placeholder. It doesn't actually go anywhere. If you were to add, the PHP and to create the actual form that submits information to a database, then this would be what you'd want to enter to tell it where to send the actual data. But with it just being in HTML, it won't actually send it anywhere, but you still have to define the action. So just put some kind of generic web address in there that would be relevant to your site. Think about what it would say if it was connected. And since we're sending to a database, we want to use the post. If you're creating like a search functionality, we would use the get, and it would tell us whatever we type in here, that's what we want to get from the site. But what we are doing with this form is we're wanting to post it essentially to our database. And so we're using the post method. So that's how you can distinguish. If you're going to create a search form for your website, which is fine if you want to do that as well, create a little search box. It should say get there. If you're creating something where information is going to be sent to a database or sent to a specific user, then you want to use the post call out. And then we'll close that there. And so I'm thinking the fields we would want to include, we would want an open field that would have name information. So we're going to put that in a paragraph so we have some spacing built in here naturally, and name colon. And then since we're going to have an open box, a text box essentially, but a small text box, you can call it the input. So we're telling it what type of input we want to use. And as you've read in the book, there's a lot of different ones that you can possibly use, but you have to think about which one is most relevant for the type of data you're collecting. And then we want to name it. The importance of the name is that's what, when you send it to like a database file, the name is what that data will fall under. So if you think of like an Excel spreadsheet, you have your header row that says this is what is in this column here. And so when you name it, that's like giving that header row, that column, a name, so that we know what data is placed inside of that column. Probably not the best to name your name here. I can get confusing, but it is collecting name information. So maybe you say patron name if that makes it a little less confusing. And then size is going to define the width of the box where they actually enter the information. And that's measured in the number of characters across. So if you say the size is 30, that means they can fit 30 characters in the box without it having to stretch out, the phenomenon where you start to enter characters in the box and certain ones on the left disappear, and then you have to drag it back like that to get back to where you're at or whatever, or navigate back using your keypad. So size 30 will allow for 30 characters to fit in without having that happen. And then you can define a minimum length. Why you would want to do that is so that you get people to actually enter valid information. Most names would be at least 3 characters in length. It's hard to imagine a name that's less than 3 characters in length if they're entering both their first and last name. So by saying 3, that makes sure we get something that's more likely to be a real name rather than somebody just entering something like just entering random characters. It doesn't completely, of course, defeat that, but it helps. And you can also enter a max length. So like I said, 30 characters will show in the box, but you can actually enter up to 50 characters without it maxing out. And then you close that within the same thing. Again, that's one that doesn't actually need the close tag. It just closes within itself. And then we have the P to end that. So let's see what that looks like. There you go. So you can fit 30 characters in there. You can see it also continues out. So I can drag back and there's more characters in there. So there's our name field. And you can make that, like I said, any length you wanted. If you feel it looks better to be all the way out here, you can enter 100 for this size here. And it'll make the box larger. And it'll actually drag it on to the next thing because it's so large. But I think 30 suffices in this case. So that's our first field. Then we probably want to do a similar thing for your email, because we'll need them to actually send, to give us their email so we can send them the list that they want of recommended resources. And that'll be the same. You could almost copy and paste most of this here because most of that'll be the same. Now, there's a couple ways to require a valid email, and some of them require more complex programming than HTML basic allows. But one thing you can do at least is that most of the email addresses we have are going to have at least 5 characters. So you're going to have the @ you're going to have the dot, and then you're going to have some suffix like net, com, org. So it's going to have at least 5 characters to be a valid email address, and probably something in front of the dot, at least 1 character, so 6 really, and something before the @ so 7 really. So the shortest you could really have is something like a@a.net, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 characters. And so you could set that min length to 7, and then at least it's got to be, somebody can't just hit like AAA and it'll be valid and go through. 50 is kind of high for an email address, but it should be fine. And somebody might want to enter multiple email addresses, which would be possible. Save that. You know, technically somebody could enter like, oh, might actually show up here. blund2 bradylund@ymail.com or something like that. And that would be sent to the database. So then you could have both of those email addresses. So it's fine to have it more than, you know, up to 50 characters because they could just add multiple like that. Okay, so now we need the actual recommendations fields that we need to have. So to do that, I think we're going to use checkboxes because most of these fields I would be using, they would be able to select multiple options. So let's see here. Let's say, please select from the following age ranges. So they're going to be specifying here, and we're going to add a break so that the checkboxes will be actually below this text here, and they'll be selecting from different age ranges that they would like for their books to be selected from. So input type, this time we're going to go with checkbox. We're going to give it a name. So this will be age range. We'll call it that, and value will be we'll call it 0 to 1, I guess. We'll close that, and then we'll put the actual text that we want to show next to the text box. So age 0 to 1. I guess I need to do that. And we'll go down here a little bit because we're going to add more, but just to see what that looks like. So now we have the 0 to 1. You can check the on and off. Now I'm just going to repeat this to save some time. You can also just add it. But I'm thinking I want 1 to 3, pre-K to kindergarten, 1 through 5, 6 to 8, 9 through 12, and then 3 different adults. And what I'm going to do here is change these. So we'll select 1 to 3, age 1 to 3, pre-K to K, to K. So I'm matching all these values to what it's actually going to say. They'll just be matching. For grade 1 to 5. And we'll have 6 to 8, grade 6 to 8. Again, if you're creating this type of form, you can add more or less detail, use your knowledge of what types of delineations would be best as far as grades and ages and those types of things to make it more authentic. So what I'm doing here with the adults is I thought I could do adult and then in parentheses minimal violence language. Adult. What would I call this? I guess medium. Adult. Moderate language or violence language tolerance. So people might say, well, I can read at an adult level, but you know, I don't want a lot of violence in my books, or I'm perfectly fine with a lot of violence or even like a lot of violence. So we'll let them specify what they like. Again, these all have that close input, and then the end of the P here, and then the end of the form. You have to have that for this all to render properly. And there you go. Those are all the lists. So I don't know, maybe you say, I actually am fine with any of these. So I'm an adult, I'm fine with any violence level. So I'll just check all those boxes, for instance. We'll move that P up. And then you could do the same thing for other categories. In fact, let me do a quick jump cut here, and I'll add 2 more categories, and then I'll join back for the submit form category. Just 1 second. All right, so now I'm back, and I did add those other 2 fields. So what I have is please select your preferred subjects, and I have a range of preferred subjects that they can click on here, and then any special interest, so they can mark whether they want classics, new books, famous authors, hidden gems, holiday themed, etc., etc. And another thing I did was I wanted to bold each of these field titles here, the name, your email, please select, etc. So I just used the strong element for that, the open and close strong, and just around the title, the field here, field title, like the name and your email, surrounded with those strong tags. And so what we need now in order to finish up this form is some way to submit it. So we're going to add an input type to submit. And we're going to name this submit. Doesn't really matter because all it does is it tells the form to submit. So like if you have this in your database, all it's going to say for every single entry on the form is just, it's going to say submit because they submitted the form. And it's not really, it's just necessary in order to have that submit button, but it doesn't really tell us anything much. And so we'll also just give it the value of submit. And then we'll save that. See, there's the submit button. Might want to capitalize that. Again, this value one here is for the submit button. The value is going to tell us what goes on this. So you could type submit the form, and it's going to say submit the form, but most of the time you just have submit. And so there you have it, a complete form where you can collect the name, email of individuals, get what types of resources they want, and then again, have that email and name so that you can contact them back with book recommendations. So something like this is what I recommend adding to your site. You could also have just a contact us form or search box or something like that. But think of what would be useful for your fictional library in helping patrons navigate the site or find resources they're looking for. And as always, make sure you're saving the file as both TXT and HTML because you don't want to have to redo all of this. All right, everyone, that's pretty much it for forms, and I'll come back with one more video on our site very soon.